You ever sit in a meeting room and realize you've already lost, but nobody else knows it yet? That's where I was on that rainy Tuesday morning, staring across the polished table at my so-called colleagues. The room was filled with the usual players. The new director, a couple of mid-level managers eager to prove themselves, and, of course, the CEO's hand-picked favorite, Mark Delaney. They were all smiles on the outside, but their eyes told a different story. They were about to push me out? Quietly, efficiently, like a cog they no longer needed. I'm John Harris. I've spent over 35 years working for the Department of Public Infrastructure. I designed projects that shaped the city's skyline, re-engineered transportation corridors, and modernized water systems that millions depend on daily. Yet on that day, all of it was about to be erased, or worse, stolen. It started years before, though I didn't see it coming. You see, I was never the flashy type. No suits that cost more than a month's salary, no glossy presentations with fancy graphics. I was the guy who came early, stayed late, and knew the ins and outs of every project like the back of my hand. The silent expert. Most people didn't notice me, which was fine. I preferred it that way. But that quiet expertise made me invisible. And when Mark Delaney arrived 2 years ago as the new deputy director, a man half my age with half my experience but twice the ambition, the gears began to shift. Mark's vision was different, flashier, short-term wins and headline projects, the kind of initiatives designed to catch attention and bring quick political capital. I was the roadblock. I kept pushing for long-term sustainability, accountability, transparency. I fought to ensure every project followed rigorous safety standards, environmental reviews, and realistic budgeting. It annoyed them. And the moment I pushed back on one of Mark's pet projects, a highway expansion riddled with questionable contracts and rushed timelines, that's when things started to go sideways. 2 months before that fateful meeting, I was called into the director's office. The mood was tense, almost clinical. "John," the director said, "we appreciate your decades of service. Your dedication is unquestioned." I nodded. "But," he continued, "the department is evolving. We're restructuring to align with the city's new vision. Your role, well, it's being phased out." I asked for specifics. There were none. Instead, I was offered early retirement, a package too small to be generous, too large to refuse. I declined. That's when the subtle campaign began. My emails went unanswered, reports were reassigned, meetings excluded me. I became a ghost in the very office I built my career in. And then they took it all. The projects I'd designed, the plans I'd submitted, even the public recognition, all handed over to Mark and his team. But here's what they didn't know. Throughout my career, I'd learned that systems can be manipulated, but they can also be tracked. I'd embedded quiet safeguards into the department's project management software. Tiny, almost invisible flags and audit trails that track data changes and approvals beyond the usual scope. Not to sabotage anyone, but to protect the integrity of our infrastructure. To ensure accountability, even if I wasn't there to watch. These weren't the kind of protections you'd find in a flashy startup pitch deck. No kill switches or sabotage lines. Just patience. The power to let time reveal what shortcuts and corners had been taken. And sure enough, within weeks of my exclusion, those safeguards began to light up. Contracts changed. Budgets inflated. Safety reports altered. The system was quietly screaming the truth. I knew I couldn't fight this head-on. Not anymore. So I planned. Carefully, strategically. I collected evidence from the logs, cross-referenced data, and contacted trusted allies within the city's oversight committees. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wanted justice, and I wanted the truth to come out, eventually. That's when the game changed. The city council started asking questions. Audit teams arrived. Media inquiries began, sparked by whistleblowers who had no idea I was behind the scenes. Mark and his cronies tried to spin it all as bureaucratic delays and growing pains. But the deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. The infrastructure department had been compromised, and I was ready. The weeks that followed that rainy Tuesday were full of controlled chaos. Not the kind that made headlines, the kind that ate away quietly at the foundations. Meetings without minutes, budget amendments passed late at night, schedules rewritten by unseen hands. It was textbook institutional betrayal. They didn't fire me outright. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, they tried to erase me. I'd walk into meetings I was once leading and find someone else at the head of the table. My name vanished from project drafts. Juniors I had mentored suddenly spoke over me, eyes flicking to Mark Delaney for approval. Mark, the golden boy. All polished charm and TED Talk buzzwords. He'd managed to convince the new director that the department needed a fresh mindset, code for sidelining anyone who remembered how things actually worked. And he was clever. Not brilliant, but clever in the way ambitious men are when they've never truly failed. He delegated the dirty work. He let others swing the axe. Meanwhile, he kept his hands clean and his suits cleaner. But I had one advantage he didn't. Time. You don't survive 4 decades in public infrastructure without learning how the real levers are pulled, where the paper trails start, and more importantly, where they're meant to end. I didn't retaliate. Not yet. I watched. And while they stripped me of projects, I began documenting everything. Every change date, every mysteriously fast-tracked permit, every safety requirement conveniently overlooked. They thought the system we used was just another outdated tool. But I'd had a hand in building it. A little-known clause in my old mandate had given me permission years ago to lead a redesign of the infrastructure oversight software. A project no one else wanted because it didn't have ribbon-cutting photo ops attached. I designed it to be lean, efficient, and quietly incorruptible. The system didn't just track inputs, it tracked intent. Every file edit, every deleted comment, every emergency override was time-stamped and tagged. Most employees didn't even know it existed. Until I did. 2 weeks after I was iced out, I got a ping from the system. Then another, and another. A contract for the new expressway project, a bloated monstrosity Mark had pushed through, had been edited at 2:13 a.m. The safety checklist had been marked as complete 4 hours before the actual on-site inspection. That wasn't a red flag. That was arson. I printed the logs, saved them off network, and locked the drive in a drawer I hadn't used in 5 years. I didn't know when I'd need them. Only that I would. That's when I approached Sarah Nguyen. She wasn't one of Mark's people. She was quiet, principled, an internal auditor with the kind of sharp mind they didn't invite to launch parties. I caught her during a break over burnt coffee in the hallway kitchen. "I need your help," I said, sliding over a file. "But you can walk away now, and I'll never mention it again." She opened it. Her eyes flicked across the pages. The color drained from her face. "This is real?" I nodded, "and just the beginning." From that moment, we worked in near silence. Early mornings, late nights, USBs passed like contraband. She pulled financial statements. I matched them to timelines. We uncovered irregularities so blatant they almost looked staged. But the most damning piece? A contract amendment, buried deep, that funneled emergency repair funds to a shell company linked to Mark's cousin. The funds were diverted just 2 weeks before a city-wide water main rupture. They hadn't just robbed the public. They'd endangered lives. We brought the file to the city's internal ethics board, a group known for being slow, meticulous, and impossible to intimidate. Sarah and I sat across from the chairwoman, a no-nonsense woman named Eliza Grant. "This will bring down half the department," she warned. "We know," I said. "That's why it has to be airtight." She looked at me for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "Then we'll do it right." The audit began quietly. Quiet enough that Mark didn't notice at first. He was too busy doing interviews about the upcoming Expo rail extension, a project I had started, but he had plastered his face across. But slowly, the cracks showed. Questions from council members, unusual requests for documentation, anonymous leaks to the press. Mark smelled smoke, but it was already too late. I wasn't just using evidence, I was using their arrogance. Then came the incident that changed everything. A newly laid bridge segment failed a routine stress test. It hadn't even been open to the public yet. The investigation revealed that the materials used were substandard, but signed off as premium grade. Mark panicked. He threw mid-level engineers under the bus, fired 2 inspectors, and ordered a complete internal reset. It only made things worse. The ethics board subpoenaed communication records. They found emails, WhatsApp threads, even voice notes. I had anticipated this too. You see, I had placed time-triggered alerts within the system, digital breadcrumbs. One of them activated the night Mark's assistant tried to delete a file labeled Alternative Procurement Workflow. That file contained forged signatures, mine among them. That was their final mistake. They hadn't just tried to erase me from the narrative. They tried to use my name to cover a billion-dollar fraud. And now, I had them. I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted an apology. But as the city crumbled beneath headlines of fraud and gross misconduct, the courtroom became inevitable. Mark Delaney walked in like a man still convinced he could win. Armani suit, designer watch, that plastic, media-trained smile that had once fooled half the council. But something in his eyes had changed. He wasn't here to gloat anymore. He was here to survive. And that told me everything I needed to know. The courtroom buzzed with tension. City employees packed the gallery, some to support me, some out of curiosity, and others, I suspect, to find out if they'd be next. Mark's defense was clever. I'll give them that. They didn't try to deny the corruption outright. Too much evidence had already slipped out. Instead, they pointed the finger at me. John Harris, the defense attorney said with a smile, was a brilliant engineer, but he was also a bitter man. Overlooked, marginalized, phased out. They claimed I'd constructed the entire system, not as a safeguard, but as a weapon. That I had designed the audit flags, the version histories, the automated backups, to frame the people who pushed me into early retirement. It was audacious. And for a moment, just a moment, I could see the uncertainty ripple through the room. But you see, I had anticipated this move months earlier. I'd spent 35 years working with bureaucrats who twisted truth like it was policy. I knew how fragile memory could be, how easily integrity could be repainted as vengeance. So I had prepared. I had a paper trail, internal memos, time-stamped emails, revision logs from over a decade back, and third-party code reviews from when the safeguards were first implemented, long before Mark even arrived. And I wasn't the only one who remembered. They brought in Lydia. She had retired 5 years ago. My former project coordinator, tough, meticulous, and allergic to politics. She testified that I had insisted on those audit trails after a minor budgeting scandal nearly derailed a sanitation overhaul. He didn't trust people to do the wrong thing, she said. He trusted them to do what was easy. That's why he built those systems. Then came Noah, a junior developer I had mentored. I tried to remove one of the flags once, he said. Thought it was just clutter. John explained, calmly, as always, that accountability is like structural support. You don't notice it until it's gone. The courtroom was quiet, no drama, no theatrics, just truth, methodical, unshakable truth. Still, Mark wasn't finished. He took the stand, charismatic, poised, and for 10 minutes, he wove a story that might have fooled someone who didn't know him. A story about an overzealous veteran resisting innovation, sabotaging change out of pride. He ended with a line clearly crafted for headlines. I tried to bring our department into the future. John Harris tried to drag us into the past. It landed. You could feel it in the air, a few reporters already scribbling it down. So when it was my turn to testify, I didn't counter with data or systems or policy. I told a story about the first bridge I ever helped design. It was small, a pedestrian overpass in the East District. The project didn't make headlines. But we finished it on time, under budget, and it's still standing today. And not once in the decades since has it had a structural complaint. Why? Asked the jury. Because we didn't rush. We didn't cheat. We respected the process. I paused. That's what they tried to erase. Not just my work, but that belief. I ended my testimony with something Mark couldn't fake. Humility. I didn't build those systems to trap anyone. I built them because I knew one day someone like Mark would walk through our doors. The jury deliberated for a day and a half. When they returned, their faces were grave. Guilty. On every count. Fraud, conspiracy, negligence, abuse of public funds. Mark didn't react. He just stared ahead, as if the world around him had gone silent. And maybe, for the first time, he understood what silence really meant. But the courtroom wasn't the final battleground, because just days after the verdict, a series of anonymous leaks hit the press. Internal emails, backdoor contracts, private conversations with outside developers tied to city council members. Mark wasn't the only one involved. The rot went deeper, and the public wanted more than a scapegoat. They wanted cleansing. The mayor, under pressure, formed an independent commission to overhaul the Department of Infrastructure. They asked me to lead the transition team. I said no. I didn't want power. I wanted legacy. Instead, I proposed a new initiative, a public archive of all past and future infrastructure projects, budgets, revisions, safety reviews, and contractor histories. Transparent, searchable, immutable. They named it the Harris Standard. I didn't ask for that, but I accepted it with quiet pride. Because now, every time someone tries to bury a mistake or manipulate a budget, they'll come face to face with the one thing they didn't expect. A system built by someone who knew how this would all play out. Months later, I visited the East District Bridge, the same one from decades ago. It still stood, weathered but strong. A mother and her son walked across as I watched from the other side. The boy asked, "Who built this?" And the mother said, "Someone who cared." They took everything I built and called it theirs. But what they didn't understand is that I never built any of it for credit. I built it to last. I built it to outlive people like them. And I built it so that, eventually, the truth would reveal itself. Because I'm John Harris, and I don't speak loudly. I build things that do.